Hello, this is our 5th annual St. Andrew's Day Social. It's a bit different this year, of course, with an online edition. We'll have to serve ourselves at home, the tea, the shortbread, and the scones, but nonetheless, this is wonderful. And I'd like to begin just by thanking each of our contributors, and especially Christopher Hall for his photo editing. St. Andrew's Day, November the 30th, every year. It's important to note, I guess, right at the beginning, that St. Andrew is the patron saint of many peoples, of Greece, of Russia, of the Ukraine, of Italy's Amalfi Coast, of Malta, of Barbados, and, surprise, surprise, of Scotland. As a congregation, it's perhaps the latter that touches us most closely. And we're going to begin with a celebration of Scotland itself, thanks to Audrey and John Marshall. And we're going to continue with a vignette about New Scotland, thanks to Elaine Coder.
Happy St. Andrew's Day.
We begin with a brief musical introduction, during which we hope you will sing along. John and I will, but those of you who sit anywhere near us in church will be pleased to know that John's mic will be closed. After that, a short exploration of a facet of Robert Burns's work, followed by a Glasgow rendering of a reading from the Gospel according to Luke, which we hope you will recognise. Then we will close once again with a song.
Robert Burns' name is known across the world. His works have been translated into many languages, even English. He was a hero in the Soviet Union. His works cover all aspects of human society and relations, including the personal, the romantic, the philosophical, the political, the religious, well, almost. He was, however, a poet of his place and time, and brought his muse to the affairs of rural Ayrshire of the 18th century. A large part of his work was set to music, even these works that were both topical and political. He was, in fact, an 18th century rapper. Burns had very definite opinions, what true Scot doesn't, and loved expressing them. He was an observer of people, and he liked people, or he didn't, and he loved to write about it. He particularly loved writing epitaphs, so much so that he often wrote them before the subject had died. It was good to be admired as a friend, not so good to be on the other side. Here are some examples. On Robert Muir: what man could esteem or what woman could love was he who lies under this sod. If such thou refusest admission above, then whom shalt thou favour, good God? On the other hand, William Graham: stop thief, Dame Nature called to death, as Willie drew his latest breath. How shall I make a fool again, my choicest model thou hast ta'en? Of his two greatest friends and supporters, first Robert Aiken: know thou, O stranger, to the fame of this much loved and honoured name, for none who knew him need be told, a warmer heart death ne'er made cold. And Gavin Hamilton: The poor man weeps where here Gavin sleeps, whom canting wretches blamed. But with such as he, where'er he be, may I be saved or damned. Or more casually on a local worthy. Lament him, Mauchline husband's awe, he often did assist ye, for had ye stayed hale weeks awa, your wives would never miss ye. Ye Mauchline bairns as on you pass to school in bands together, O tread ye lightly on his grass, perhaps he was your feather. But the real vitriol extended to those who attacked his friends. William Elliot was a hypocritical elder who had taken Gavin Hamilton to ecclesiastical court for non-church attendance and other sins. Gavin had been acquitted, but Robert Burns had not forgotten. Holy Willie. Here Holy Willie's sair worn clay takes up his last abode. The soul has ta'en some ither way. I fear the left-hand road. Stop, here he is, as sure as a gun. Poor silly body, see him, nae wonder he's as black as grund. Observe who's standing wi' him. Your Brunsdown devilship, I see, has got him there before ye. But haud your nine-tailed cat a wee, till ance you've heard my story. Your pity I will not implore, for pity ye have none. Justice, alas, has gi'en him o'er, and mercy's day is done. But hear me, Sir Deal, as you are. Look for something to your credit. A queef like him would stain your name, if it were Kent ye did it. That, by the way, was written before William Fisher died, and he died after Burns, after falling into a ditch drunk in the middle of winter. Enough of that. Before our closing song, I'm going to read you a passage from the Glasgow Gospel, published in 1992 by the St Andrews Press. This passage is taken from Luke. It is rendered to you in the vernacular of my native city, and I hope it is comprehensible to you. Jesus said, "There was once a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Hey, father, can I ask you a favour? Will you no gie me my share of the family gear, right now, save me waiting till you're dead?' The father was hurt, but agreed to split his property between his 2 sons. A wee while after, the younger son picked up all his gear and left home for the bright lights of the big city. It wasn't lang afore he'd wasted his hale fortune on the bevy and the parties and the living it up. Just when he was hitting rock bottom, a terrible famine swept over the country. He needed work right bad, but all he could get was a job with a farmer feeding the pigs. He was so famished that he could have fair eaten the beans he was feeding the pigs. Nobody took pity on him. Finally, he gets wise and says to himself, 'Ach, I'm off my head. So I am. At home, even my father's servants are well looked after, and here's me starving. I'll just need to bottle up me pride and gang on home. I'll confess to my father that I've done wrong and ask him to sign me up along with his servants.' So he gets up and starts out for home. He's still a long way frae his house when his father catches sight of him and runs out to meet him and throws his arms about his son and kisses him. The boy was greeting. 'I'm sorry, father, honest so I am. I'm just a loser and no fit to be called your son.' But his father shouted to the servants, 'Fetch out some nice clean clays for my boy and a ring for his finger, and you want to kill a prize calf. We're going to have ourselves a great celebration this very night.' Knew the big brother was coming in frae the fields when he came near the house, and he heard the music and the jigging, and he called to one of the servants and asked what was up. 'Your wee brother's come back hame, sir,' he was told. and we're having a celebration like. Your father's even killed a prize cow for the feast. The big brother was boiling, and he wouldn't go into the house. So the father comes out to reason with him. He answers his father, "Och, hold your own and listen to me. I've slaved for you all these years, and you didn't even give a wee party for me, not once. And now the wee naif comes back. Been on the randan, so he has. Spent all his money in booze and whores, and you kill the best cow for him." His father was hurt at all this. "My son," he says to him, "you've been here with me. You must ken that all that's mine is yours. You see it was right to celebrate. I thought my son was dead, and he's come back to life. He was lost, and he's now come home." Amen.
My mum was a MacDonald, with a lowercase d, as she liked to say. Her grandmother was a McWilliam. Her great-grandmother was a Mackenzie. Like many people living in Nova Scotia, I come from deep Scottish roots. The first permanent settlers in Pictou County, Nova Scotia, arrived on the ship Betsy on June 10, 1767. They carved out a tiny settlement in the forest, about 2 miles from the present town of Pictou. On September 15, 1773, the town of Pictou welcomed nearly 200 Scottish settlers on board the ship Hector. The landing of this ship is regarded as one of the earliest arrivals of Scottish settlers to Canada. They settled in places like New Glasgow, Mount Tom, Mount William, and Loch Broom. My mum always said that the green rolling hills of the Appalachian Mountains reminded these settlers of the hills of home, and so they stayed. The voyage of the Hector started a wave of emigration from Scotland that resulted in Pictou being affectionately named the birthplace of New Scotland. For the Scots on board the ship Hector, the decision to leave their native land wasn't an easy one to make. Many families were forcibly removed from their ancestral lands during the brutal Highland clearances and given nowhere to go. Stranded in their own country, with no place to call home, many looked across the Atlantic for a brighter future. When a Scotsman named John Ross showed up, offering a fresh start in Canada, many jumped at the opportunity. Ross was a recruiting agent working on behalf of Scottish businessmen who had purchased land rights in Pictou and charged Ross with finding willing settlers. He offered cheap transport and promised a year's worth of supplies, plus a large piece of coastal farmland to anyone willing to make the journey. 189 people boarded the Hector from 2 different points in Scotland, 10 at Greenock and 179 at Loch Broom. The passenger list was mostly young families and male labourers, but included a piper not named on the ship's manifesto, and so was ordered ashore, but the wailing refrain of his bagpipes as he was leaving prompted the passengers on board to plead with the captain to let him stay aboard. The ship and its cargo of people faced several difficulties during the long and arduous trip. Smallpox and dysentery took its toll. 18 people died and had to be buried at sea. The expected time of the voyage nearly doubled as a result of huge storms. This meant stretched food rations that were completely exhausted when the Hector docked at Pictou. The Hector began its life as a cargo ship, employed in local trade around the waters of Britain. By the time it was converted into a transport ship, it was in incredibly poor condition. Passengers wrote of being able to dig their fingernails into the rotting hull and pull out chunks of wood. Winter was fast approaching when the ship finally docked. It was too late to plant crops. Supplies and provisions promised back in Scotland failed to materialize. No shelter had been built, and the allocated land was 3 miles inland in a wooded area that had yet to be cleared. This meant they would be unable to use the harbour for fishing. The settlers refused the land allocated to them and set about building homes close to the coast. They resorted to attacking the place where their supplies were being guarded and seized them. From these dramatic and troubled times, the Hector settlers slowly but surely began to make Nova Scotia and Canada their new home. Though faced with what must have been seemed like insurmountable odds at times, these intrepid Scottish immigrants showed grit and determination. Canada promised them a second chance and a fresh start, and they were eager to embrace this opportunity. By 1786, a call was made for a minister capable of speaking both English and Gaelic. Dr. James Drummond MacGregor arrived in Pictou from Scotland in July 1786. The year following his arrival, he had 2 churches in the county built, one on the West River at Loch Broom, near the head of Pictou Harbour, and the other on the East River between Stellarton and Glasgow. During that first July, the men of the communities were chiefly engaged in building the 2 meeting houses. They divided into groups. One party cut the logs and hauled them to the sites. Another hewed them and laid them in place. A third provided boards for the roof and floors. A fourth provided shingles. Joiners were appointed to make doors and windows, and those who did not like to work provided the glass and the nails. Logs were used for seating until pews could be built, and when the pulpits were made, they were not mahogany, but of the white pines of Pictou County. Service was held in each church on alternating Sabbaths. Dr. MacGregor preached 2 sermons, one in Gaelic and one in English. Both sermons were 2 hours long. Some suggested that those who understood both English and Gaelic should pay double the stipend for Dr. MacGregor. The current log church at Loch Broom is a replica of the original and well worth a visit. The significance of the Hector and her passengers has been immortalized in the town of Pictou. A replica of the ship was made to commemorate the ship's contribution to Nova Scotia's Scottish history. The replica is a floating museum of the Hector settlers' trials, tribulations, and eventual triumphs, and a true celebration of close bonds that connect Scotland and Canada. Happy St. Andrew's Day.
Happy St. Andrew's Day.
For all of us, with or without Scottish connections, St. Andrew's Day is an opportunity to celebrate our Christian faith and this particular Christian congregation. You might remember that Andrew was a fisherman with his brother, Simon Peter. Together they were two of the first of the 12 disciples called by Jesus to follow him. Andrew is known in some branches of the church as the first called of the disciples. It was Andrew that was baptized by John the Baptist. It was Andrew who, with Philip, directed the Greeks who were seeking Jesus to the side of their Lord and Master. Andrew went after the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus to preach. The disciple became an apostle, and he went far. He went as far as Kiev, along the Black Sea, up the Dnieper River, even on to Novgorod. As he went, he unsettled the authorities, both religious and political. And it was in Greece that the Roman governor there sentenced him to death, to crucifixion. But Andrew, the disciple of Jesus, deemed he was not worthy to die in the same way. And so he asked to be crucified on an X-shaped cross. So the first wave of Reformed Christians that came to these rocky and snowy shores were the French Huguenots. Their witness, however, did not last long because in France, the Protestant tradition was made soon illegal. Another wave appeared in the people of the Scots. They came with their Scottish Presbyterian tradition, and they came with their patron saint, Andrew. They built their churches and named their churches St. Andrew's in clear opposition to the Church of England sanctuaries that were often named St. George, the patron saint of England. The very first English-speaking Presbyterian congregation established here was in Quebec City. In the year 1759, Scottish merchants and soldiers formed a worshiping community, and in 1810, they opened their first stone sanctuary, still existing in Quebec City, named, surprisingly, St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. And so now we have, here in St. Andrew's Kingston, two members of our congregation to tell us something of the witness of that congregation, Marilyn and Peter Trudeau.
Hello everybody. It's a real pleasure today to be able to come and talk to you about the St. Andrew's churches that have been in my life. It's really an honor because I'm not Scottish, but I've spent an awful lot of time in the Presbyterian Church, and the two main churches were both called St. Andrew's. I grew up in St. Andrew's Church, Quebec City. It's the oldest English-speaking congregation in Canada. It was started by the Fraser Highlanders after the Battle of the Plains of Abraham in 1759. But what's really, really fantastic is that the building that is still being used was dedicated on St. Andrew's Day in 1810. St. Andrew's, Quebec has a lot of different little things that are in common with St. Andrew's, Kingston, besides the name. And I think one of the most striking things is both churches have raised pulpits. And as far as I'm concerned, that's just the way a pulpit should be. It should be raised. St. Andrew's, Quebec also has a very, very large manse. But before that building was built, they had a small, what is now known as the Kirk Hall. And the Kirk Hall is where the minister and his family lived. And on the west-facing wall, there were no windows because on the other side of the street was Moran College, what is now Moran College, but at that time it was a jail. And the story is they used to have public hangings, and they didn't think that the minister's wife and children should be witnesses. So they built the Kirk Hall with no windows on that side. The Kirk Hall became a public school once the minister and his family moved into the larger manse. The minister who actually had the manse constructed was Dr. Cook. He was minister number 5, and he was very, very involved in education. He was a founding father, I guess you could call him, of Queen's University, or Queen's College at that time. He was a principal of Queen's University. Not that he wanted to be, but he was talked into it. And he was also the first chancellor of Queen's University. And his comment shortly after that was, you know, it really shouldn't be a Presbyterian university. It should be for everyone. And I thought that was kind of interesting. He was incredibly well thought of in Quebec City. He was from Scotland, but the French people loved him because in a number of their parishes they'd had fires, and he would be one of the first people on the spot. What could he do to help, and how, you know, offering to do anything. So they absolutely loved the man. Very, very involved in education, as I said. He was principal until his death of Morin College, and that was affiliated with McGill University. And he was also instrumental in founding the High School of Quebec, which became Quebec High School, and that's where Peter and I went to school. Peter and I were married in St. Andrew's Church, and in fact I have the distinction of being one of the last brides of the manse, because I was invited along with my wedding party to get ready for our wedding in the manse, and that was quite a treat because it was an absolutely stunning building. St. Andrew's has undergone some radical changes in the last little while. They ran into quite severe money problems, but they still had a congregation, so they thought, no, we're not closing. So what they've done is the manse has now been repurposed to be an office building. The church has just recently, the sanctuary has been gutted, totally gutted, except for the raised pulpit, which is still there. So now the church is a church on Sundays, and the rest of the week it's open for any events that might, weddings, parties, meetings, whatever. And I just have to refer to my notes. The minister, present minister, said she was actually thought this was a wonderful idea, because the church is going to be used by the community now, and in fact they are bringing the community into the church, and in this way they're really hoping they can hang on to the building, the congregation, and their history after 200 years. When I was speaking about Dr. Cook being well regarded by the French community, one of the ministers, and in fact the one who married Peter and I, Dr. Bragg, he was used to take great delight in walking around the streets of old Quebec dressed in a long black overcoat and a black tam, and that's exactly what the priests at that time wore. So he was known throughout that area as Father Bragg, and well respected. And in fact, the nuns at one of the local high schools where I taught, they were confessed to me one day that they used to sneak in the back door when church had started just so they could hear him preach. So the congregation has always welcomed and been welcomed by the French. And now I think it's really interesting, the oldest English-speaking congregation in Canada is bilingual. And I think that's really fitting.
And so beginning in Quebec City, and then going on from coast to coast, churches were named after St. Andrew. Here in Kingston, a prominent group of citizens in the year 1818 began meeting at Moore's Coffee House on Store Street, now Princess Street. And from that movement, there came to be a church built on the top of a limestone ridge overlooking the city, a church that in the year 1822 was completed, and their first minister arrived on Christmas Day of that year. They named it St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. And so today we celebrate St. Andrew and we celebrate St. Andrew's Church. It's a Christian community of faith and of witness that continues here at the center of this city. We'll conclude now with three contributions of faith and of fun. We begin with Kim Sutherland Mills Outside. We'll continue with Julie Lee in her kitchen. And then we'll conclude with John Hall, who's not at his organ.
There's lots of ways to celebrate our Scottish heritage. Maybe we listen to the bagpipes tapping our toes and with a wistful face while the Sassenachs around us go, ugh. Maybe we enjoy shortbread with our tea. Maybe we like orange marmalade on a scone. But for the gardening divas at St. Andrews, celebrating our church's heritage means planting. So inspired by Eva Barnes' story about Reverend McCarr, we've created a new blue and white garden, and we've just planted several different varieties of white narcissus in his memory. And in the spring, you'll be able to enjoy them here at St. Andrews.
And the wild mountain thyme grows around the blooming heather. Will ye go, lassie, go?
Hello everyone and happy St. Andrew's Day. My name is Julie Lee and I'm happy to be joining you today from my kitchen table. And maybe that's where you're watching from. I think it's really great that we're still having this event in spite of everything and having it virtually. And I'm very pleased to be participating. I will admit to you that when Reverend Johnson asked if I would participate, I agreed before thinking about what it is that I would contribute. So one morning while having my breakfast, I stumbled upon an idea, and this is what I'm going to be sharing with you today. 5 ways oatmeal is like my faith. So I think we all know that oatmeal has a long tradition in Scotland, and one of the reasons why it was so popular is because Scotland has a very short growing season. It's very wet and damp and kind of cold, and oats grow very well there. And one of the ways that people would consume those oats was by creating a porridge, an oatmeal. And so aside from having our faith, our tradition in our faith, we also, if you're like me, probably shared a breakfast. So 5 ways oatmeal is like my faith. Number 1, it's a daily practice. I have oatmeal every morning, and if you're a creature of habit, maybe you do too. And also practicing our faith is a daily practice, whether it's by demonstrating our Christian values, praying, reflecting, every day. Number 2, it is sustaining. So if you have a bowl of oatmeal, it's going to carry you to the lunch hour. You might even be able to push it a little bit. It has that holding power. And our faith is the same. It is going to get us through really tough situations. The days when I don't take a moment to reflect and to pray, I notice it in how my day goes. And our faith is going to carry us through the good and the bad. Number 3, it's personal. If you go to the grocery store these days, there are so many different types of oatmeal, but the key ingredient remains the same. And it's the same thing with the Christian faith. Each of us have a personal relationship with God, but the base is the same, and we share that in common. Number 4, it's here for us in every season. So some people might think that oatmeal is just a winter food, something to have on a cold day. I would disagree with you. We can have it in the summer. You could have overnight oats. I can make a lot of arguments on the different ways that you can have oatmeal because I think I've enjoyed it every which way. And our faith is the same. It is going to be there for us in every phase of our life. And that's a deep comfort, which takes me to point number 5 and my final point. And that is that a bowl of oatmeal can be really comforting. For some of us, maybe it takes us back to our childhood. It's warm, it's hearty, it is really nice. And our faith is the same. It's there for us, it's there to comfort us, and we can rest easier knowing that we can always turn to God. So those are the 5 ways that oatmeal is like my faith. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I had originally said to Reverend Johnson that I was going to be contributing an ode to oatmeal. Lucky for you, I gave up on the poetry pretty quickly. But anyways, thank you so much for listening. And again, happy St. Andrew's Day.
Good afternoon. This is for the Scotland, and we will find out the. Well, happy St. Andrew's Day, and I hope you're enjoying your shortbread, preferably with your mask off. I have some exciting news. Behind me here is the Alan McPherson House here in Napanee, and recently some long-lost film of Harry Lauder was discovered in the attic. Now, the story is that Harry Lauder was at the end of his North American tour. He had made a performance in Ottawa and then traveled here, and on his way he went through Lanark County and Perth, and he loved the Scottish background of that area. And of course the Alan McPherson House here was built in 1820s by a Scottish immigrant, Alan McPherson. Anyway, this film, very exciting. It was shot when Harry Lauder was here. Harry Lauder was anxious to sing one final song before returning home, and he decided to sing what later became quite a hit, The End of the Road. So here we are. Privileged you are to be able to see this long-lost film featuring Sir Harry Lauder. Hope you enjoy it. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Here I am at the Alan McPherson House, here in Napanee, it's called. I just traveled from Ottawa, all these wonderful Indian names, but I traveled through the most wonderful country. It was Lanark County, I think, and there was Perth, and they had a couple of rivers, the Clyde and the Tay River. It was just like being home. So here I am at the McPherson House. He was Scottish, of course, and he built this house in the 1820s, I think. And I thought I'd sing you a wee song, but I just wanted to tell you something, a quick story. What a small world it is. I've traveled all over the world singing and entertaining. I just love entertaining people. I hope they love watching me. Anyway, just to tell you what a small world it is, I was up in the Lanark County area there, and they've got this Clyde River, and so I decided to take a wee stroll. And you know it, I ran into a fellow who's my butcher from back home. Can you imagine? What a small world. And there he was. His name is Roman Sadowski, but a wonderful butcher, except we tried to teach him how to make the haggis. Oh, it wasn't very good, actually. It tasted more like Polish sausage. Well, anyway, I took his picture, but it was very dark at night, but I I have the picture here. You probably can't see it, but it was very dark at that time. And oh, my dear butcher friend, and I rode on the back, Roman in the gloamin' by the bonny banks of Clyde. Now that would be a good title for a song, don't you think? Well, I'll work on it. Anyway, on with the song. At the end of the road. I hope you like it. Every road through life is a long, long road filled with joys and sorrows too. As you journey on, how your heart will yearn for the things most dear to you. With wealth and love 'tis so, but onward we must go. Keep right on till the end of the road. Keep right on to the end. Though the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep right on round the bend. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to the happy abode. Where all your love you've been dreaming of will be there at the end of the road. With a big stout heart to a long steep hill, we may get there with a smile. With a good kind thought and an end in view, we may cut short many a mile. So let courage every day be your guiding star always. Keep right on till the end of the road. Keep right on till the end. Though the way be long, let your heart be strong. Keep there through round the bend. Though you're tired and weary, still journey on till you come to your happy abode. Where all your love you've been dreaming of will be there at the end of the road. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
So on this day of grace, November 30th in the year 2020, we'll conclude with that musical number that Audrey and John spoke of earlier. And nothing more to say but Happy St. Andrew's Day.